Distraction is proud to be sponsored by Omega Bright, the premier natural advanced omega-3 formula for mind, heart, and joint health. And Talkspace, the online therapy company that believes that therapy should be affordable, confidential, and convenient. For a special offer, visit Talkspace.com/distraction.
Today, the gender assignment on restroom doors is at the center of a legal brawl.
In the U.S., the Supreme Court has cancelled a scheduled showdown over the bathroom rights of transgender students in public schools.
It's becoming more heated by the day.
Today, we are filing a federal civil rights lawsuit against the state of North Carolina.
Our state legislature believed this was an unnecessary government overreach.
I'm not a freak. My very existence is not a perversion. I'm just a person.
Hi, this is Dr. Ned Hallowell with the podcast Distraction. Today we have a very interesting show on the subject of transgender issues and also focusing on the bathroom issue as that's been in the news. We have a variety of different people, different points of view, different ages, and it's a very encouraging issue. Honestly, we tend to make things controversial because that's what we tend to do these days. But this is really encouraging. People who have been in secret, much as gay people were for so long, people who have been in secret and feeling shame are now finding better solutions. And, when these solutions come up, they can run into trouble and there's controversy and lawsuits and whatnot. But I think it's all heading in a very, very good direction. People who have been suffering in silence and feeling shame are now finding relief and finding a new life. And as you'll hear from one of the folks, instead of attempting suicide, they're actually able to lead a life being who they truly are. So stay with us, and we will move right along and into the interviews with some fascinating people. Our first interview is with Mitzie, the mother of a 4-year-old child by the name of Peyton. Mitzie, first of all, thank you for taking the time to join us, and could you just tell us a little bit about your son, Peyton?
Peyton is a 4-year-old transgender boy. He was born a girl, and up to he was 3 years, 7 months old when he decided to change into a boy.
And how did he announce that fact?
He went to a 3-year-old preschool, and I guess there was another boy with the name Peyton at school, and he was, I guess, head over heels with this boy. And so he would talk about Peyton all the time, and it was Peyton everything, how much he liked him and all of that stuff. And when he first told me that he wanted to be a boy, he just said it kind of in passing, and he sometimes pretends to be a dog. So he tells me, I'm a dog today. So I just thought it was one of those things that he's just playing pretend. Uh-huh. But it wasn't like that. It stuck. And he was very adamant that he wanted to be a boy. And once school got out in June, everything continued with how it just seemed that Peyton was very important in his life. And I didn't realize that it wasn't just about that boy. But in time, I realized that it was Peyton telling me, that's what I want to be, that's who I want to be. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense.
Sure, it makes sense. Yeah. So he just knew in his self that he was more comfortable identifying as a boy than as a girl.
He did, and he started out. He has a speech therapist, and he had a very difficult time understanding pronouns, which little kids do have issues with that sometimes. Mm-hmm. But for him, it was very significant, where he just couldn't tell who was a girl and who was a boy, so he couldn't say she or he, and he always mixed them up. And once he came out and said, hey, I'm a boy, that all completely cleared up for him, where he understood the use of the pronoun for he for a boy and she for a girl. He turned 4 in August of last year, and then in September he wanted boys' clothing, so I went out and bought him his first boys' outfit. So So for me, going out and buying the clothing wasn't a big deal because I have his older brother. But making the change and completely changing his wardrobe was what was difficult for me, because it's kind of like you're saying goodbye to all those clothes that you had first purchased for him as a girl. And because I have a 3-year-old daughter also, I bought a lot of clothing to match them together, you know?
Sure.
So I had to make that switch. But then after the first outfit, and he wanted more, and he was so happy once he became a boy and everybody knew him as a boy, that I couldn't stop that from happening. So I just went out and bought him all the clothes in his size as a boy, and I cut his hair. It was only up to his shoulder, down to his shoulders. But then in October, the end of October, I told him if this was really what he wanted, we would cut his hair in a boy's hairstyle. And we did. To him, he was more fully like a boy. What was interesting was that after I cut his hair and he looked at himself in the mirror, he thought he was going to see a different child, but it was still him. So he had a puzzling look in his face, and I don't know that I can describe it, but I definitely saw something there that he thought it was going to be him as Peyton and not him as looking still like the little girl, like those features, you know?
He's anatomically a girl, right?
He is anatomically a girl.
Okay. And how do you explain it to other people? Do you have to, or do people ask any questions?
I think the biggest thing is my family. My parents are very, very religious and old Catholic religious. They're in their 80s and their 70s. So to them, they don't fully understand it. I just told them, you know, this is who he is, and you just have to learn to accept him for who he is.
Right.
And he is no longer that little girl that everybody knew. And now he is just, this is who makes him happy to be a boy.
And you started a blog about it, correct? My Transgender Kid?
Yes.
And what kind of reaction have you had?
I think it's not that known yet, so I've had a pretty good reaction. I gave the blog to his teachers in school and to...
you say in school, he's going to what, preschool? Or
he is in 4-year-old preschool right now, yes.
Okay. And they treat him like a boy?
They do treat him like a boy, and they talk to him as a boy, but the bathroom is always the issue.
What happens there?
Well, in 4-year-old preschool, they have mixed bathrooms for the most part, so they're not labeled as boys or girls, except that they have a play area in the basement of the school, and then there they have a boys' designated bathroom and a girls' designated bathroom. And for a while, he was being sent into the girls' bathroom even while he was already dressing as a boy. And so it was very, very upsetting to him that he couldn't go into the boys' bathroom with the boys. So I spoke to the principal, and the principal has been pretty good about it now. And what they do is they bring him upstairs and have him use the mixed bathrooms, and they send in both boys and girls at the same time. The issue is going to be next year when he is in kindergarten, because in the elementary school level here in Wisconsin, they have designated boys and girls bathroom. And so he is going to have to use a staff bathroom.
And he's completely on board with this, obviously. He's delighted, right?
He is. This is all him. He picked out his name.
Yeah.
He decides, it's just like having another son in my house, another boy. And it's like he never was a girl. And when he does refer to himself as a girl, he says, when I was a girl, kind of in the past, or it's even almost like in a different life.
What was his name as a girl?
His name was Emery.
Emery. But then he picked Peyton because his friend was named Peyton?
That's the name he liked, yeah.
Yeah.
And he picked it himself. And
other kids, they're accepting of him?
The kids accepted him from the get-go. It was way easier for them than for the adults around them.
I'm sure that's true. And the adults are the ones who you have to deal with.
Well, and my 8-year-old, because he is 8, he did ask, well, he is a girl. Why does he want to be a boy? You can't do that. So I did have to explain to him that, yes, you can, and you just have to be the person that makes you happy. But after, I think, maybe 2 conversations, it was perfectly fine with him too.
Mm-hmm. Now, as he gets older, assuming that he remains identified as a boy, do you think he'll want to have surgery or not?
He's already asked me for his penis, so I'm pretty sure yes.
Uh-huh. And have you looked into what that entails?
I have not looked into that yet. Taking baby steps, I guess.
Of course.
We're only 4, you know.
And how do you think, with the change in administration from Obama to Trump, what is the impact you think that'll have?
I think for the gay, lesbian, transgender community, for all of us, I think it's a very negative impact. Mm-hmm. I don't think that anything that he is putting into place right now is very accepting of us.
And how will you help Peyton, only age 4.5, deal with that? I'm
just going to keep telling him that he just has to be the person that makes him happy and not to worry about all the other outside views from other people because I'm hoping that, Trump will be 4 years and then we will be done and somebody better will come along. So I'm trying to be pretty optimistic about this. So because he is only 4.5, he's not really going to know the impact of this right now unless something would personally attack us, I guess, in a sense. Yeah, if you happen to run into some very bigoted person or something like that. Right. But you'll probably be able to protect him. Right. And right now, he is a boy. We go out in the community, and he uses the men's bathroom because nobody knows any better, and he looks like a little boy. And what, does he just go into a stall? Yeah, he just goes into the stalls. He goes, I send him in with his brother, and they just go into the stalls. So I think right now it's okay, but once he gets into the teenage years, which hopefully will be done with Trump, then that's where it'll affect them more. But presumably society will continue to evolve and become more enlightened and make accommodations for all of this. That is my hope. Yeah. Well, I think I'm pretty sure that will happen. I mean, there'll be bumps along the way, but it wasn't so long ago that we're dealing with all this with racism and now we're dealing with it with gender identity issues. Yes. Well, Mitzie, thank you so much for joining us. It's been very enlightening. You're a wonderfully flexible and adaptive mom, and Peyton sounds like a really cool kid. Thank you. And now we will hear from a 20-year-old individual by the name of Grayson. So, Grayson, thank you for joining us on Distraction.
Oh, of course, no problem.
And can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I live in Canton, New York. It's way upstate New York, about half an hour from Canada. I'm 20 years old. I'm studying criminal justice at SUNY Canton. It's my second year here, and I'm doing pretty well.
That's terrific. Now you were born a girl, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
I was born a female.
Okay. And when did you first realize that you identified more with being a male?
Well, I first noticed that I was different when I was very young. I can't remember the exact age, but I knew there was something different from the other kids when I was younger. But I didn't actually know that I was transgender until I was 16 or 17, because I didn't really know what transgender was until then. Sure. How did you discover, A, what it was, and B, that you were it? It was actually a friend had seen somebody on Instagram or something they'd seen, his name is Wesley. He's really famous on Instagram. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No.
But she showed me him on Instagram and told me how she thought that I was really similar to him and stuff, and just was kind of showing me his page, and I ended up going through it later, and he's kind of what made me realize, maybe I am trans, and I kind of moved forward from there.
And what sort of reaction were you? Concerned, afraid, excited? What?
A little bit of all of the above. It was exciting, kind of knowing who I was, figuring it out. But at the same time, it was scary. How was my mom going to take it? How was the rest of my family, my friends? Transitioning just seemed really scary.
And what in fact happened? How did your family and friends react?
They actually took it extremely, extremely well. my mom told me that she'd love me no matter what, that she financially may not be able to help me with it, but that she would always be there emotionally. And same with all my friends. They're really supportive and stuff, and it's awesome.
How about your dad?
Oh, my dad is 100% behind me. He doesn't really understand what transgender is, but he told me he's going to love me no matter what. Like, he doesn't care.
And I understand you were in a sorority?
Yep.
Now, that's all
Actually,
that's all women, right?
Yeah, it's actually still complicated. I mean, I told them going in that this was something that I kind of was moving towards.
Yeah.
And they all kind of supported me, and it was kind of like, it kind of helped actually with being away from home. It gave me like support here too. Mm-hmm. So even though it gets a little uncomfortable at times being in a sorority, it's also my family away from home, so it's still a good thing. But
you, in the sorority, you dress and behave like a man.
Yep, and they all refer to me as their brother.
So you're the only man in the sorority.
Yeah, I'm the honorary brother of the house.
Are you all able to joke about it a little bit?
Oh yeah, we joke about it all the time. Yeah, they always like to make stabs at me and stuff, but it's totally 100% joking. It's because we're so comfortable with each other.
Have you gotten to the stage where you're dating people?
Yeah, I've actually I've had a girl in my life for about a year now, and she met me before I was really openly trans. It was when I was just coming out. So when she first met me, I identified as a female still because I hadn't really come out, and we're still together after it'll be a year in April, and she's still with me. She totally supported me through it. She told me like she had an inclination that was what I was going towards before. When she met me, she thought that I was a boy and stuff, and she always knew that that's how I felt.
Does she identify as gay or straight or?
She identifies as pansexual.
Pansexual.
Yeah, because with that, it's more about the person's soul and like the personality and stuff versus the gender being the focus.
So the gender is almost irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly.
Or at least the anatomy.
Yeah, exactly.
So, could I ask you, are you able to engage in lovemaking?
Yes. Actually, being on testosterone, it's increased my libido, if anything. Like, that's one of the first major side effects that I noticed was that right there, and it works really well and stuff. And
Grayson, can you mentioned taking testosterone. Can you say more about that?
Yes. I actually have. It's actually shot day today, which is really exciting. I take a testosterone shot of 0.5 milliliters of testosterone once a week. I do it every Monday in my thigh. It's about a 1-inch needle, which looks a lot bigger than it actually is. It doesn't hurt as bad as you'd think it would, as long as you relax or whatever. And
do you inject yourself?
Yep, I do it myself every week, and no problem with it. I've only had 6 shots so far, and I'm already growing facial hair. My voice has deepened. I've seen that my clitoris has grown in size as well. I want people to know this stuff.
Exactly.
You don't really find stuff online about.
Exactly. And you also said your libido is increased.
Yep. I've actually, it's funny because I read on a blog that the 3 H's of hormones is hot, horny, and hungry. And those are the first 3 side effects I noticed. I was getting my libido increased a lot. I'm hungry all the time, and like I get all these hot flashes randomly, and it's crazy, but I love it. I love every minute of it, so it's fine.
So are you going to go through a sex change?
That is the plan. If I have the financial availability, that I do want to get top and bottom surgery at some point. And I'm hoping that by the time I get bottom surgery, it's a little more updated, though, because the options right now aren't 100% what I would want.
And what do you know? You've looked into it, obviously. What does top and bottom surgery entail?
Top surgery is removal of the breast tissue. And so with that, depending on breast size, they can either do like smaller incisions or different cuts and stuff to make the scarring less. I would want a keyhole surgery personally because it's just a very, very small incision that you barely see. And after the healing, you don't see it at all. But with the bottom surgeries, there's only 3 options right now, and none of them will give you much of a sensation, really. Like, it won't feel like a real penis is what the problem is, yeah. Because there's no way to create new nerves yet. And so because of that, they can't create the sensation, you know.
And you wouldn't ever be able to generate sperm, correct?
No.
But in terms of the actual lovemaking, would it ever be possible for you to have a penis good enough to penetrate a woman?
From what I've researched and stuff, I've actually read that with the testosterone, the clitoris can grow up to like 3 inches.
Wow.
And I've had other trans guys write on blogs and stuff and say that they have been able to have penetration once it's fully grown and stuff like that. So it is something that's possible for trans guys.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you can have orgasms regardless, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's just a matter of whether you have intercourse in the traditional way or not.
Yeah.
And how does it feel to you to be talking about this?
I've gotten very comfortable with it just because I talk about it a lot, because I'm very open with that, answering questions and stuff, because like being in a sorority, a lot of my sisters ask me questions all the time, and so I'm used to answering them.
Yeah, I think it's great. And obviously you're doing a service, because a lot of people like me don't know the answer to these questions, and you're sort of lucky to be born now as opposed to 20 years ago.
Yeah, that's what I am thankful for, that, because it could have been a lot worse.
What do you think would have happened 20 years ago, or even worse, 40, 50 years ago?
Honestly, I don't think I'd be in college today. I don't think I would have survived, because mentally, like, I was so unhappy in who I was versus who I am today.
Yeah.
And so if I couldn't have made the strides to be who I am, I don't think I would have survived to today.
Not survived, meaning you would have killed yourself?
Yeah, I think so.
Really?
I had an attempt when I was 17.
Wow.
And yeah, it's scary to think about, but it's a reality for a lot of trans guys, that it's trans people in general too, trans women.
So you just felt trapped in a woman's body?
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
And just, can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, if you actually got to the point of attempting suicide, what's the feeling of being trapped in a woman's body?
It's almost, I'm trying to think how I can put it in words. It's almost like you look in the mirror and it's just, you feel just hate. And it just builds up inside you, and it's so overwhelming, like, all the time. All you can think about is like, oh my God, they don't see me as a boy. Nobody sees me as a boy. Nobody sees who I am. And it's very overwhelming. Like, I don't know, at least for me it was, the worst part was always just thinking, like, they don't know that I'm a boy. Like, nobody knows. And I really wanted everybody to know that I was.
And the hate,
I think that was probably the hardest part.
The hate you felt was toward your body, or?
I think it was a mixture of not being seen as a boy and seeing my body not looking the way that I would want it to. Like, I don't have the pecs or, the penis or anything like that. And so sometimes it can get a little hard.
And the fact that society doesn't understand leads to suicide. I mean, it's just so important that we get that message out there, that this is something that you have no control over, and you're put in this terrible situation where you're trapped in the wrong body.
Yeah, because if I could have pushed away those feelings of self-hate and stuff like that, I definitely would have. But it's just, I had to change. It had to.
Moving forward, what do you think do you see any major obstacles to your living a wonderfully normal, healthy, happy, fulfilling life?
Honestly, I think the only obstacle that is really put out there is yourself, because if you get down on yourself too much, that is always my problem. At least when I start getting down on myself, that's when I start getting into bad funks. Mm-hmm. And I have to realize, like, in my head, everything is okay. Like, you just got to take everything one day at a time. Mm-hmm. And it's all about who you surround yourself with. As long as you're surrounding yourself with good people and good vibes, I feel like you can have that good mentality and keep going.
Well, Grayson, you're a very impressive person. I'm really impressed at your courage and your humor and your And I'm really glad that you were able to go from attempting suicide at age 17 to feeling so good about yourself and about life at age 20.
Yeah, it's awesome.
My thanks go to Grayson for not only coming on the show, but being so candid and honest. It takes courage to open up like that, and only by doing that can you really inform people and serve people, which Grayson most certainly did. Thank you so very much. Now we'll take a moment to talk about our sponsors. I'd like to talk to you for a moment about Omega Bright, the premier natural advanced omega-3 formula for mind, heart, and joint health. Now, as I've been telling you over the past few months, I take Omega Bright myself, my wife takes Omega Bright, and I recommend it to all of my patients. In fact, Omega Bright is recommended by more doctors than any other omega-3 supplement. It's good for your heart, it's good for your mind, and it is especially helpful for those who have bipolar disorder, ADD, depression, and other sorts of mood swing disorders. It promotes positive mood, focus, cognitive clarity, and overall good health. You can order Omega Bright directly by calling 1-800-383-2030. That's 1-800-383-2030. Or by going to our website, distractionpodcast.com, and clicking on the Omega Bright logo. I'd like to recommend to you our newest sponsor, Talkspace. That's Talkspace. It's an online therapy company, and this really is the way of the future for sure. You get to connect with a licensed therapist, handpicked for you, for as little as $32 a week. Now, that's a bargain as far as therapy goes, particularly because these people are qualified. You're not talking to a robot. You can text them, you can audio message, you can video message, as much as you want with this therapist and develop a relationship. It's a phenomenal deal in an era where therapy is not only needed but also hard to find and hard to afford. To sign up or learn more, just go to Talkspace.com/distraction. That's Talkspace.com/distraction. And if you use the coupon code distraction, you can get $30 off your first month. Give it a try. It's a great idea, and I've had marvelous reports from people I know who've used it. Okay. We're participating in a movement this month called Tripod. Tell a friend, your mom, anyone about a podcast they'd really love. Just hit the share button on the bottom left of your screen. Let us know what podcasts you're sharing on social media by using hashtag Tripod. That's hashtag TRYPOD. Thanks for spreading the word. All right, now let's get back to the show. We've been talking today about transgender issues with some reference to the court case involving bathrooms, and we're lucky to have with us Carrie Kupek. She is the Director of Communications and the legal counsel for the Alliance Defending Freedom. If you're the legal counsel, Carrie, does that mean you're an attorney?
I am an attorney.
Okay, very good. And she comes to us from Washington, D.C., and what is your position? What are you concerned about? What's going on here?
Well, we have a couple of concerns, and one of them stems from the fact that we have several cases where we are representing students and parents. In fact, in one case alone, we are representing over 100 students and parents in a school district right outside of Chicago in Illinois, and there the school district opened up their locker rooms, their shower rooms, their restrooms to a biological boy identifying as a girl. This boy claims to be transgender, and they opened up these normally sex-specific intimate facilities to this boy under threat of their federal funding being pulled by the Obama administration's Department of Education and Department of Justice. Now, what was concerning in that particular situation is that the school there had gone to a number of lengths to sensitively and compassionately accommodate this transgender student, including giving him access to a single stall restroom and changing facility. Then they went a step further and actually created this student a custom dressing room that looked just like the girls' locker room. In fact, they built it right next to the girls' locker room. And they even allowed this student to invite his female classmates in with him. But unfortunately, that was not enough, and they ultimately opened up the locker rooms and restrooms to this particular student.
And what, did that go to court?
So this is currently in litigation, but what was troubling about this particular case is that the school board had some meetings, and several of the high school female students went to the board meeting, and they read letters, and they expressed affection for this transgender classmate. They expressed compassion for this classmate, but they also expressed their, understandably, real feelings of distress and discomfort at the thought of undressing in front of their biologically male classmate. And unfortunately, the school did not give any weight to these concerns. They essentially outright rejected them and ignored them and proceeded to open up the girls' locker room and showers to this biologically male student.
And what was their justification in doing that?
They were afraid of the Department of Education, Department of Justice's threats that they would lose their federal funding. So they ultimately caved to the Obama administration's directive. If you remember, last spring in May of 2016, the Obama administration had issued that directive on transgender students and saying you had to open up these sex-specific places to a student if that student identified as the opposite sex. Well, now that directive has been rescinded under the Trump administration. So as you saw, that was the big news in the last couple of weeks. This guidance was rescinded. It was cited as there was too much legal confusion surrounding the issue. So now that directive no longer exists, and now the Supreme Court has actually decided to not hear the Gloucester case, which focuses on this issue, and they have kicked it back to the lower courts to give further consideration to the issue in light of the fact that the Trump administration rescinded that student guidance.
So from a legal standpoint, it looks like this is taken care of? I mean, the lower court will have to work it out?
Yes, that's right. And I want to just explain a couple of points. And as you know, Title IX was enacted in the early 1970s to give women equal access to athletic facilities and educational opportunities that their male counterparts were getting.
Right.
And Title IX prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex, meaning biological sex.
Right.
And then this letter was issued by the Department of Education under the Obama administration to the schools, public schools across the country that said, sex within Title IX now includes gender identity. So in other words, if you're not opening up these facilities to those who perceive their biological sex as something else, you are in violation of Title IX, and your federal funding can be pulled.
But that's been reversed now?
Well, the guidance was pulled, citing much legal confusion, and now the Supreme Court just kicked it back to the lower courts for them to sort of hash it out. But because this is something that came from Congress, it would only be appropriate for Congress to redefine biological sex within Title IX to include gender identity if they wish to do so.
Gosh, I'm sure you and I, let's say you and I are making the rules. We want to be sensitive to everybody, right?
Right.
And that would include girls not wanting to undress in front of someone who anatomically looks like a boy, right?
Absolutely.
But then a boy, how do you be sensitive to the boy who feels like a girl? I mean, what?
Sure. You do what these schools have been doing, which is why this never should have been a federal issue in the first place. This is a state and local issue because these are the folks, the teachers, the administrators, who work day in and day out with these students and know them best. They have been crafting compassionate and sensitive solutions for children for years now. And so, what does this include? This includes for a student, say, who is working through, say, a gender identity issue or struggling with gender identity, then yes, it would make sense, and a school should, as they can, accommodate that student by providing them access to a private restroom, a private facility, but they certainly should not do it at the expense of the privacy of the other children around them. And schools should be looking to affirm the dignity, privacy, and safety of all students, not just a few individual students.
Yeah, no, but then what if the transgender boy, a boy who identifies with being a woman but has anatomically is a male, what if that person says, I feel discriminated against by not being able to go into the girls' locker room?
You know, it's funny. There's a lot of discussion on this, and I always like to point out, which is kind of the obvious, people are inherently private about their bodies.
Right.
This is the reason we wear clothing. If we didn't care about anatomical parts, we wouldn't wear clothing. So to suddenly be having a conversation where we're questioning whether girls or boys should be forced to be exposed to the opposite sex as they are taking off their clothing it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it does seem to, we're living in a whole new world where we have to be sensitive to all kinds of things,
right.
But it would seem now if the boy says, I'm calling him boy, but he identifies as a girl, says I feel discriminated against by being given a locker room of my own. I want to be in with all the girls because I feel like I am a girl, and you're saying it's too bad because we really can't do that because all these girls don't feel comfortable being naked around you.
Yeah, and again, I think it's very important to be compassionate and sensitive to these students who are feeling these things. These are real feelings, and this is, like you said, this is a new horizon, really, for us culturally speaking.
Yes.
So that's why it's important to create sensitive and compassionate solutions, but doing what's best for all students to make sure that everyone's privacy is affirmed and protected. Yeah. But what's interesting is that with Title IX, which is the law that's at the center of all of these lawsuits and what's at issue, and which will probably be something that will come up again to the Supreme Court, and they'll have to ultimately decide whether or not biological sex includes gender identity. Title IX is created to protect women, to give women that fair shake, and now it's being used as a tool against women in many of these situations.
Title IX was instrumental in allowing women access to, women's sports is the main place it was applied, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it changed the whole world of collegiate and high school level sports for girls and women. Now they were not going to be excluded anymore. The law required them to have facilities and et cetera. But I don't think it was ever intended to let boys into girls' locker rooms.
It wasn't. In fact, if you look at the history of the law, if you look at the record, the notes surrounding it, it's very evident that sex simply meant biological sex. And in fact, there is a comment surrounding this law within the congressional record that says this particular law still allows for sex-specific changing rooms and restrooms and things like that. I've been watching this media coverage, and I've been listening very carefully to the public conversation, and there's been almost no acknowledgement of the feelings of the other students. We've been doing a lot of talk about the feelings of Gavin Grimm, who's the transgender student at the center of the Supreme Court case, which is good. We should be listening to Gavin's feelings, but there's been no acknowledgement of the other students. In fact, it's been as if they don't exist, and that's very troubling to me. What kind of message are we sending our young people if we say your privacy violations and your privacy, that doesn't matter? And in fact, if you dare speak it, you may as well be a bigot. But I just want to read quickly to you a quote from Sarah Harrington. She is one of the female students in our case outside of Chicago, the one I was referring to earlier. Yeah. And this is what she says here. And this is a high school female student. When my school district made the decision to allow boys in the girls' locker room and shower area, it made me feel that my rights didn't matter. I should have a choice when a boy is in the room when I undress. There are sensitive accommodations for those who are struggling with these issues that respect the privacy, dignity, and well-being of all students, because every student matters. It is common sense. Boys don't belong in locker rooms or shower areas with girls.
Yeah, so that, like you said, it's obvious, but often takes us a long while to get to the obvious. Wouldn't that be the obvious solution, that you have a girls' locker room, a boys' locker room, and then for want of a better term, a transgender locker room where And do we have to have two transgender locker rooms, one for anatomical males and one for anatomical females?
But that's essentially what the school district did in this case that I keep referring to in Palatine, Illinois. They created a brand new locker room right next to the girls' locker room for this transgender student.
And if there were an anatomical female who wanted it, they'd create another one for him or her?
Now, this is what that particular school did. I know the schools that we've been working with and that I've seen, they go to many lengths to do what they can to make sure that the student who's identifying as transgender, that their privacy is protected and affirmed. Yeah. But unfortunately, what I've been seeing the activists on the other side do is they've been pushing forth this really radical idea that it doesn't matter, that those things aren't enough, that those are stigmatizing solutions, and that a biological boy or girl should be allowed into the opposite sex locker room, regardless of the feelings of those particular students.
Well, gee, I guess the courts will work it out. Well, Carrie, it's a real pleasure talking to you. You're an extremely intelligent commentator, and I can't thank you enough for shedding some light on this interesting and problem that is still in process of being resolved.
Thank you for having me on.
Thanks a million. Take care. Bye-bye. Now, let's hear from 17-year-old Emma, accompanied by her counsel, Matt. Emma, can you tell us how you got involved in this issue? What was the law in Pennsylvania that you came into contact with?
Sure. There was what is called a SOGI law. That's a sexual orientation and gender identity law about to be passed in Pennsylvania that I very strongly disagreed with. And I was asked to participate in a rally at our state capitol to oppose this law, and I agreed. And that gave me some connections to Alliance Defending Freedom that allowed me to do these interviews and to speak out on this issue that I feel pretty strongly about.
Emma, what part of the law did you disagree with?
I disagreed with the part that opened up locker rooms, shower rooms, changing areas, sleeping accommodations, restrooms to members of the opposite biological sex so that I would be exposed to that in those vulnerable places.
And that was written into the law, huh?
Yes.
Okay. So you volunteered to become vocal in opposing that. Yeah, you
yes,
had
I volunteered.
And if you don't mind,
please, Matt, go right ahead.
Yeah, so I'm an attorney. I've worked with Emma and students and even school boards across the country on this issue. And one of the things I think is a great tradition we've had in our education program is the ability to offer compassionate accommodations to students in a variety of circumstances.
Right.
If a school's got a dress code and you've got a student that their faith maybe requires them to wear a head covering, the school doesn't abandon the dress code. It offers an accommodation, allows that student to fulfill what their faith requires them to do while still having a dress code for everybody else.
Right.
And what we advocate and encourage is sort of the same accommodations here, that if you've got a student that's struggling with gender identity issues, we can offer accommodations like single-stall changing areas or restrooms or a variety of things that schools have always been really good at finding solutions.
Right.
But we don't have to abandon our traditional sex-specific locker rooms, changing rooms, showers in order to offer those accommodations. There's a way to protect everybody's privacy interest.
Yeah, gosh, the one-size-fits-all ends up fitting no one. Both you and Emma seem eminently reasonable, and I'm very grateful to you for sharing. You know, it all comes down to the individual cases and trying to respect everybody's sensitivities, and it sounds as if there is a way to do just that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Emma can tell you what she was dealing with was they were trying to force this at their state and even their local school where she attends, and rather than sitting down with parents and staff members and students and working all of this out, it's this top-down, let's tell you what to do. We're not really going to take your privacy interest into account, and I think that's what really motivated Emma to get involved in this.
Well, good for you, Emma, and the top-down solution is rarely the one that works, and good for you for speaking up and for finding a reliable counsel like Matt. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For having us.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of Distraction. I hope you share with me a feeling of gratitude, first of all, to the people who participated, but also of having learned something. What are the struggles that transgender people face, but also what are the struggles that other people who are trying to accommodate them, what do they face? Are we asking people, who are of one biological sex to be naked in front of someone who's of the opposite biological sex? And is that fair? And what about the feelings of both parties involved? And what are the solutions? It seems the solution that has emerged is really the development of 4 different locker rooms and changing areas, one for traditional males, traditional females, and then for transgender who identify with the opposite. So instead of having 2 sets of changing areas, we have 4. At least to me, to my way of thinking, that seems to be the most reasonable solution I've heard so far. But in any case, regardless of what answer we come up with, it's been wonderful to open the dialogue. And as I said at the very beginning, it's so positive that people who have been in hiding, in secret, locked up within themselves, are finally able to come out of that prison. And instead of contemplating suicide or contemplating leading a wonderful life and contributing to our world. It's a very positive story, and yes, it's fraught with controversy and complication and whatnot, but in the long run, it's going to be worked out, and worked out in a way that'll be satisfactory, not only satisfactory, but liberating to us all, and advancing our society one step more toward an enlightened position. Distraction is produced by Collisions, the podcast division of CRN International. Collisions, podcasts for curious people. Our music was created by Mark Berman. Our audio engineer is Scott Person, and our producer is Sarah Gurton. Thanks to our sponsors, Omega Bright, the premier natural advanced omega-3 formula for mind, heart, and joint health, and Talkspace, the online therapy company that believes that therapy should be affordable, confidential, and convenient. For a special offer, visit Talkspace.com/distraction.